welcome to another episode of Livelunch. We're joined by the wonderful Megan Nicholas, who was responsible for that introduction, which heavily featured my voice.
Well, you did it 1 week, and then I was like, well, I've got to take live lunch and make it happen.
We are joined on this episode by Megan Nicholas, who used to be a host here but has left us and is now returned as a guest. Some would say she started at the top and she's worked her way to the bottom. No one would say that. It's just me being silly.
Seriously, anyone else?
And we also have the wonderful Sophie Spital with us. And Sophie asked me to introduce her as my best friend. So we are joined by my best friend on Livelunch, Sophie Spital. Welcome, Sophie. It's good to have you on the show. Sophie, tell us a little bit. What do you do, Sophie?
Well, question first. Which camera am I looking at? Because I want to sort of...
Sophie, there's only one camera.
Oh, okay. That one. What do? I work for a YouTube channel as a sort of freelance editor, video producer, anything to do with video.
Great.
Yeah, that's what I do.
It's good to have you with us, Sophie. And of course, we have the wonderful Matt Carvel. So we don't need to introduce Matt because Matt and I host the show together. Yeah. But Matt is sitting in the preacher's seat.
Yeah, even though I didn't do this message.
So Matt, why don't you do a summary of the preach?
Can do, yes. Just grab. So we have taken a step out of our current series, which is called The Promise Endures, and because it is our gift campaign, real sort of big giving moments. We've been doing a gift campaign throughout the month of June, where we've been raising money particularly for church plants that were involved in Belfast and Bath and Krakow. And Neville Jones spoke to us about the parable of the 10 Minas. That's something I learned this week about how to pronounce it, and maybe I've still got to learn that because maybe
so which
I'm
one
not
is
correct.
it?
I've heard, well, Neville did say sort of Mina.
Right.
Mina. And apparently, if you think of the
Nicki Minaj.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the Muppets theme tune thing, Mina.
Oh, okay.
Mina, yeah.
That's the Mina.
I prefer Nicki Minaj.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Let's not go with my pronunciation.
Mina. Anyway, so it's that parable. And Neville was kind of saying about how it talks about sort of master who goes away and entrust money, about 3 months' wages it would be, to different people in differing amounts actually. And it's a parable that Jesus told about the kingdom, and it sort of parallels with Jesus' life. And in the parable it talks about how the people didn't want the master and wanted to reject him, and Neville was saying that's very much the kind of culture that we live in, wider culture that we live in, where the authority of Jesus, the kingly rule of Jesus, is not something that people want, not something what people think about. And also I think even for us as Christians, we can feel overwhelmed by what's going on in life, and the fact that Jesus is irrelevant to most people, but also just the sort of everyday facts of the situation we find ourselves in terms of finances, uncertainty in the world, war in Europe, and different reasons. And we can feel like, oh, what's the point of investing in the kingdom? What's the point of even planting churches? So much is going wrong with the world. Is there much hope? Especially in a sort of European context, I suppose. Christianity seems on the decline rather than on the rise. But Neville was so helpfully exhorting us to remember that it's always the time for investment in the kingdom, that Jesus' kingdom is growing. And in a Western context, we probably don't feel that in the same way that other parts of the world, the church is exploding, and the gospel of Jesus that, and the church that began 2,000 years ago as just a small group of people is now right around the world, millions and millions of Christians. And so having that mindset, and particularly that relates to the imminent return of Jesus. We don't know when Jesus is coming back, but the way that we should think about the kingdom is that being expecting of Jesus to return. And part of what faith looks like is to live now with what we have in front of us in a way of expecting if Jesus is coming back, like how does that shape how I think about how I use my time, how I use my life, how I use my finances. And actually Neville was talking about thinking particularly of our finances
brilliant.
that we are managing
Yeah.
on behalf of the master who's coming back to see what we've done with it.
So I guess the second part of that would be we talk about finances, and I know a few of our questions are around money and giving, and questions about should we give if we're in debt, why should we give to the church, not the poor, that kind of thing. But before we jump into the question on finance, would those minas be something other than just money, like talents and resource that you've been given? And if so, somebody listening into this episode or somebody listening to the preach, how do they work out what those minas are in their life? Any thoughts on that? And Megan and Sophie, keen to hear your thoughts as well. How did you work out what were some of the minas in your life and how you could multiply them?
Yeah. Well, I think time is money is what people say, in the sense that I know that sounds lame, but the point is that we can create value whether we're creating money or not. And some people are rich in time and they can do all amazing things to serve the church, and some people but have very little money. So I think that's just as important as just giving money, is giving our time to serve the church. And you can do that through serving on a Sunday, or if you've got a gift that doesn't fit in necessarily to the framework of the Sunday service, then I think, and then that's what I've had to do. Like, I think just I'm more evangelistically, like, that's my thing. I love talking to people about Jesus. It's not, you can do it on a Sunday with new people, but for me, like, to use that, steward that well, is to use it outside the church. And yeah.
Megan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out. I think they are separate, like money, talents, time. They are separate things, but they're all gifts from God, and we use them in different ways. And maybe we lean on one at one time in our life, maybe more than others. And I feel like God has given us all one of those three, and there's probably more categories there. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's knowing at what season to lean into one more than the other. So yeah, I think there's definitely been times in my life, particularly as a student, which doesn't feel that long ago, where I felt like I had no money, and I was still going on a journey of giving and learning how to give in that moment. But I also knew that I had a lot more time. Yeah. And that I could serve in different areas, and so I lent more on that and didn't disregard giving, but like definitely lent on more of what I felt God had given me, and the grace He'd given me for that season. Yeah. So yeah.
Just because you haven't got much to give doesn't mean I think that you shouldn't give, because Jesus commended the woman who gave of what little she had monetarily.
That can be such a problematic story, that one, where the lady who gave her last 2 copper coins, like, if that's in the Bible, then I don't have an excuse. The thing that I do really, especially with you, Megan, and you as well, Sophie, is that you've used the tremendous talents that God's given you as a vocalist, as a video editor, and you've somehow managed to turn that, to multiply resource that you've been able to earn and produce through that. I don't really have a question. I just think it's commendable when you see people using the skills that they have to monetize it, and to say, do you know what, this is how much resource that I have. I can go and put these other skills to use. So you do work for the church a couple of days a week, 3 days a week, but then in the other time that you have, you've found ways to earn more money, which is brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I brought you all the way here just to say that.
Thank you. May I? I think when I used to work for the church, but I knew that, again, it would be that God had something for me that was different. And so there's seasons, obviously, when you can do a kind of churchy job, but for most people, they're not doing churchy jobs. And I think this church, for me in my life, has been really, really great at sort of pushing this idea that it's not like, if you're a worship leader or a preacher, like that's a godly job. And it's just like, there's always been this kind of insistence that going out into the world, into the marketplace, doing the thing you're doing is just as godly and worthwhile in the kingdom. And I definitely say that I got that from this church, which has been really great and really releasing, because then everyone does have different gifts, and some of them, like, are just completely, the guys that work at Kingdom Landscapes, they're building like gardens and walls and stuff like that and serving the community. So I think that's really good. And what I've found like the most helpful for me in giving, but in everything in my Christian life, pardon me, is to step back and like, I don't know if I do this every day, but pretty much every day, kind of think, what is my life for? What's it about? Because the people around us, they can be living like, let's say you don't know God, you don't believe in him, you don't know that you have necessarily a destiny or a calling or something to work towards. You're kind of just like, well, I'm here, I'll try and be happy and build some kind of meaning in my life. And so most people are just kind of looking to be happy and comfortable. But for us, we actually know that we have a calling and something to do and something to build, which is the church and the Great Commission. So it's kind of like, for me, that really helps, because it's like I can orient everything in my life towards that, and think what do I feel like in this season God's calling me to do, and then like prioritize that. So it's actually really practically helpful, I'd say.
Just going back to what you said, I think so reflecting on my own journey, coming into lockdown, I pretty much had nothing. Like I had no jobs, and so Joel and I are both creators, and we came to lockdown, and it's like, how on earth are we gonna get through this? And I think just reflecting on that, the importance of community and people seeing things in me. So even like yourself, you saw things in me that I could do video editing, and like other people saying, could you come teach? And I think community was so important for that, where you might not know what your gifts are and how to make money out of those talents, but people might see that and they might see the potential. So I think working that out with other people and asking them, well, what do you see me doing? How can you see me making money and doing this for the glory of God, from the talents that I've got?
Superb. We used to have like a business network at Emmanuel, or CCK.
I think we do. I think we still do.
Oh, do we?
Matt David set that up.
Oh, great. So how do people link up with the business network?
I think it might be on the small group page.
Okay, well, if you want to plug into our Emmanuel business community, please get in touch. Drop us a message on however you found this video, and we will get back to you with links to connect with people.
Yep.
I think now jumping into the whole giving thing. Before we start talking about money, well, this is part of money. I was talking to somebody in my small group, but actually a couple of people in conversation this week. 3 people actually. And they talked about how we as a church, we're coming out of 2.5 years of pandemic. We are also in this incredibly expensive cost of living season in our lives, where the prices are there. People are striking because they want the inflation value has gone up more than pay rise value. And so we're facing this financial crunch personally. So our finances are being impacted on the day-to-day, but also even within church life. Churches have been depleted post the pandemic. And yes, some areas of church have grown, but some areas have shrunk. We're learning structures again. We're rebuilding teams. There's all of this that's going on. In the middle of all of this, why are we talking about planting churches hundreds of miles away? And how do you help people connect with the idea of, hey, we want to give towards planting churches hundreds and thousands of miles away? What would you say to them, Matt?
Well, I think going back to what church is really important, because when we get saved, it's not just that we have a relationship with Jesus, but Jesus brings us into his family, and the church is the family of God. And I think you go back to the early church and you see that important value, and you see that principle of giving, and even congregations in one city or one town feeling the need and feeling the lack of people elsewhere that they had heard about through the apostles. Now, they didn't have the technology and communication to even know what was going on, even a few miles down the road, because they probably would just, so obviously there were some people would travel, but it wasn't quite the same. But yet, the book of Acts is quite clear in pointing that out, that one of the ways in which we outwork our Christian faith is to see others in the church particularly as brothers and sisters, and to look to, it says in Philippians, don't look to your own interest, but count others, to be people you want to bless, not just looking to your own interest, but to their interest. And so Jesus opens us up to think about stuff in that way. So for us here in our city, yes, we outwork that brother and sister in terms of being a church, being in small group in the week, and coming together on Sundays as well. But we see the Belfast Church is not just a franchise of our organisation. it's our brothers and sisters who are wanting to share the gospel, share this good news that we've all experienced with others as well. And so we think about it in that way.
That's really helpful.
Really good.
That's a really good answer.
You sound surprised as if that would be a good answer.
No, that's really good. Anybody want to add to that? Has anything helped you specifically in the stuff that you've heard in this last Sunday, which has helped shape your thinking about why you should give in this difficult season?
Yeah, well, for me, I think the last point that Neville made, which was emphasising that your view of God affects the way that you give, or the way you just literally everything in your life through your view of God. And if you think of him as a harsh, master, then you are going to be just scared and just bury your talents, bury your money, everything. And I personally, always have struggled with this, and kind of, because there are things about God that are worthy of fear, and in the Old Testament, it's quite hardcore at times, and so but that's still God, and it's important to reconcile that with God, the truth of God's nature. And so for people that feel like that and can just feel almost paralyzed by the fear of God into not doing anything, I'd say for me, I really found the book Gentle and Lowly helpful. I know that we talk about it all the time, but for good reason, because it's a really good biblical way of just showing you the nature of the kindness of God and the grace of God, without sort of dismissing that other stuff. It just helped me a lot to when you can sort of receive that, the kindness of God, and then you kind of respond out of that naturally, and it's so much better than just trying to work it up or doing it out of works or guilt. And
it's such so important right now, when I think all of us are feeling our lack, and so remind us that actually he's compassionate to those who are in that place of lack. And you sort of the not quite the counter of what I've just said earlier, but yes, we do see it, brothers and sisters, and yes, it's great to give. It's still hard though. It's still sacrificial. It's still and it feels like, especially I think for all of us going into this gift campaign, it's like another one because it's stretching, and it's like we'd rather not, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge for us all. I don't want to sort of skirt over that and think, you're just being a Christian, of course you're just going to give and not even think twice about it. It's costly. People have to make decisions about what their food bill is and are they going to go on a holiday this year, and that is the nitty-gritty decisions that you're factoring in this too. I
think just teeing off on what you said, and this is not just a question for Matt, I guess responsibility in giving, are there principles that you can draw? So for instance, do you give when you're in debt? Do you give out of your emergency fund? What are some of the principles that you, in some ways, it's never easy to give, as you just said, but there's a difference when you're not doing your holiday, and when you're saying, this is my last £100 in the bank, I'm giving it and I've got nothing left after that, or this is my emergency fund that I've kept for a rainy day in case something goes wrong and we need the money. Are there any principles in giving that you would say when it comes to being responsible with your giving? I think I'll speak to giving in debt as well. Should you give when you're in debt?
Yeah, so I probably what I would say as a headliner that others can chip in. I think there are good principles, and there is wisdom, and I think, but at the same time, we shouldn't we shouldn't see them as absolutes, because I think in the New Testament attitude to giving is about freedom, is about grace, is about God's provision and trust and all those sorts of things. So if we're too rigid with a sense of like, oh, you should never give in this scenario, or you should make sure you say like never give out your savings and that sort of thing, because you'll hear stories of people to say, well, actually, no, I felt God prompted me to give that. And in that context is right. Now, at the same time, we shouldn't just take those stories and say, well, that's the principle then, okay? Because I think there is a good principle of saving. So as I can speak about in my life. So generally, yes, I would have certain savings that is the priority, to save that money. And I wouldn't think of using that to give. Secondly, I would say, in terms of giving debt, I think what we would say to people is do not give in a way that increases your debt, because it's not yours to give. If you owe someone money, like, because I mean, what Neville was saying is about stewarding what we have, and in a sense that if we're in debt, that's not our money. We end up owing someone else more because we gave it away. So I don't think that would be the particularly sensible, wise thing to do. However, I know someone could come back and say, well, lots of you have mortgages, and that is a huge debt. What I was thinking. So it's like, do you wait until you've paid off your entire mortgage? Well, no, because most people have that mortgage, and it's a planned expenditure that you have planned for the however many years it is, decades probably. But then you also make purchasing decisions of the other money as well. Like you would probably still go on holiday, and you'd probably still buy gifts for people, which you could say, well, they're not absolutely necessary things to spend money on. Is that, well, no, but that's in a realm of wisdom and sensible use of money. So I think with that, so the mortgage aside, you're still making those decisions, and I think your giving should factor into those decisions. I'd say same with the student loan as well. Perhaps definitely, because as you say, it's like it's factored into everything. Everything is it's there for you to live, and you do use it for everything. So. And you never know that the principles of giving in the kingdom of God are like very counterintuitive, I think. And there's definitely been times that I've given faithfully when I haven't had much, and received like way more, like in gifts, like insane amounts. Like, I used to give when I was a student, and then someone basically dropped 20 grand to pay for my student loan. It's like, okay, so God is able to provide. Wow.
I guess my next question would be, so somebody's become a new Christian, or has decided to start giving, and they thought, oh, well, I should just give my money to the poor, because those are the people that need money. I should give my money to charities that are actually working with the marginalized and the people that in our cities that need money. Why should I give to the church? And how do you hold those two in tension? Do you give to one or the other, or do you give to both, or
Yeah, it's tough, and I think this comes up, a lot, and it is a tricky one, and I think when we. Again, it was probably felt particularly last time we had the gift day, but this probably time as well, in terms of there's situations in the world, like the situation in Ukraine, where you think, oh wow, like that, surely that is the priority, to if we're being generous and being giving. So yeah, I think it's a tough one, but I think. Again, we just need to go back to the scripture, and even there are sort of prescriptive things that the Bible does say about giving, but also there's the description. And again, you look in Acts and you see that there was certain offerings that went to the poor, but there was times of giving laid at the apostles' feet, and in terms of like we're trusting you as church leaders to steward this in a wise way, whether that's to give to the widows and orphans, those who wouldn't have their own means, but also times to give, for them to be able to travel to share the gospel, and that's the thing with it. You say, well, we shouldn't give to the church, should give to the poor. Just that playing one off the other. What's more important, the poor? Because in one sense you say, well, sharing the gospel, that's what the work of the church is, and so you could give to the poor, but then if no one hears the gospel, then that's you're helping people in the temporal, but you're not helping people in the eternal. So which is more? So it's just unhelpful, I think, to sort of start playing each other off. And I think what we do as church leaders is we try and, these are all things that are important to us, and we want to plan it out and make sure we can be generous in as many directions as we feel is right. And so that's why we have, in the summer, we have our gift day that goes towards church planting, because we feel that's what something God has called us to do. And if we are just thinking about our own local situation, we would never resource that to match what we would say is our godly ambition in church planting. So we have a summer gift day that goes to church planting. We have an autumn gift day that is always focused towards the poor, the work that we do with there, and not just in a relief sense, but in investing into long-term projects, investing into people that are going to do ministry in that way for the long term and meeting the needs of the city and that sort of thing. And then we also had a gift day earlier this year that was more focused on the local church, investing in people, investing in the future. And so what we're trying to do is do all those things. And I think even last gift day, we sort of talked about that principle, like wanting to abound in every good work. Like there is a lot that God calls us to do, and lots he prompts us to have compassion for different people. And we're trying to be wise and be good stewards to give and be generous in each of those directions.
Yeah. And Christ said, you will always have the poor with you. There are always going to be people, that need money, that need resources. And that's not to say you should just, ignore them or whatever. But I think you're right in saying that we could end up seeing the most pressing need in society as people being lifted out of poverty. Or not even necessarily poverty, because most people in this country don't live below the poverty line, even the poor people in this country. Obviously, that's not to write off the problems they have, but the ultimate problem, the most important problem, is lack of Jesus. And Jesus said that I've come to preach good news to the poor. That was his thing: preach good news to the poor. Like, I haven't come to lift them into the middle classes or anything. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't mean to sound callous, but I'm just saying, I think that is the ultimate. Like, if you step back and look at the big picture, more people need to know about Jesus. And also being knitted into the church, that is a way of, because we look after each other. Like, I've lost count of the amount of times that people have given me money when I needed it in the church. So it's kind of like, in a sense, like when people join the family of God, there's also financial provision in that. Do you think that's an overly, twee way of looking at it?
Yes.
There we go. I just think, yeah, we can do both, which is what you're saying, and this church does do both, and that's important.
And it's a natural thing that some things will particularly strike us and feel particularly important. We have a particular passion about. And that's fine. That's good and that's right. I think we just got to be careful that we don't think, well, this is what I think is most important, and that needs to apply to everyone else. When you start projecting that on other people, and say what we're trying to do is trying to do all these things well. The poor are important to us. Church planting is important to us. God's called us to do both, and we just want to do it well. And that's this whole thing is about the principle of stewardship. Generosity, wisdom coming together.
Brilliant. Last question before we run out of time. So somebody joined Emmanuel and they said, great, I'm convinced by the giving. I want to start giving regularly. I want to start giving X percentage every month, which is sacrificial. It comes at a cost. And now, wow, over and above that, you're asking me to give another amount of money. What would you say to them? And how would you help them on that journey of not just giving regularly, but also considering the gift day? And if either of you have any other stories, absolutely, please feel free to share.
Something?
Yes, I think tithing and giving kind of in those special moments of the year, for the gift campaigns, They are two separate things. I see them as two separate things, at least. I think tithing for me, I see it as giving to the ongoing work of the church. Whilst you're giving into these special campaigns that are going towards something that I see it as more intentional, if I can use that. So, I mean, for me, like in terms of stewardship, Joel and I would tend to put aside percentages each month, and then for these gift days, we are praying intentionally about how much should we give towards that. I'm just trying to reflect on where like how we've done it this time. So coming into this gift day, we hadn't planned. Like, I think quite a lot of the time coming into the gift days, we don't plan for these gift days and we don't put aside. But then it's asking God, okay, well, actually, what would be the figure you want us to give? And actually, we did give one thing, and then Joel came up to me on Sunday, and he was like, I think we need to give some more. I was like, okay. So then I had to go on that process of, well, this is God's money, and I want to trust that He's spoken to Joel, and as a married couple that we are one, and He speaks through my husband as well. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. I think it's the unplanned nature of it, but trusting that God is speaking through those figures that we're giving, and that it's being intentional in those moments.
Yeah. I think very, very quickly, I think the two things I would say is, one, giving shouldn't be out of compulsion. So someone can say, well, you're telling us to give more. I was like, well, you give what you think is right. I don't know what you're going to give, and it's up to you. It's like, I'm telling you, giving is a great thing. It's an event, but also it's an adventure with God. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. That's what we learn. And these gift moments are times it's a trust thing. It's a discerning where's God leading us, and it's an adventure. And I think many of the stories come out of that sense of adventure. And so that I would see it in those terms rather than, I have to give a little bit more to it. Well. If you feel like that, then don't give. But if you see something in the adventure of this, then go for what you got faithful.
It's exciting.
Brilliant. Megan and Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on Livelunch. Next week we are back in the Promise Endures.
We are indeed.
Stephen Dawson will be speaking to us. And the site leaders.
Different speakers across different sites, and we are back in Jacob and his many wives and many children. It's going to be a fun-filled passage.
Is this the Livelunch we're going to talk about, like open relationships and polygamy?
Yeah, let's do that.
Great.
Join us next time.
See you next week. Bye.
Peace.